Hey guys, it's Bree here at Blossom and Branch Farm, and today I'm going to take you on a tour. We've done a lot of changes this year, so I'm going to show you all of those and also some things that aren't looking so great this year. So all the realities as well as the nice looking stuff. Let's go. Many of you guys have been asking about how our willow hedge is doing. So you might remember that it was last summer we planted a willow hedge, and the idea was to kind of make this cross-hatch hedge to kind of disguise the fence and put in some green space. Unfortunately, it was doing well at first, and then our contractor had to shut off our water for about a month, and so they went dry and they didn't make it. So here's the update. Is that they are all dead. I still have to pull them all out. I do want to try this again because I love the idea. I still think it would be really neat, but yeah, we're gonna just have to take all these off. So I've just been procrastinating because I have to take off each one of these little rubber connectors, and then we'll turn this into a wattle fence. So these won't totally go to waste. We are gonna save and use all these willow branches, and we'll use them to kind of make a new little wattle fence around one of our beds back in the veggie garden. But that's the update, is that they died. One of the things people always want to see is the lavender field and the progress. So now our lavender is in its 4th growing season, and of course we've got lots of native plants planted around the lavender field. This is a great one. It's actually a weeping peach, and it makes these little peaches. They aren't great for eating, but the squirrels really like them, so it helps keep the squirrels off of things like my tomatoes that I definitely don't want them eating. And that's planted amongst a bunch of other native plants. We've got a lot of columbines here growing underneath this evergreen tree, some yarrow that's kind of started to fade now. And then of course we've got the lavender field here. So now that it's in year 4, these lavender plants have gotten very big. You can see we've started to harvest some of it here, and we're just about to harvest the rest here in mid-August. And the lavender is really nice and full. Now this is a hybrid lavandin, so it's called phenomenal. So it's good for culinary uses as well as being fragrant and having those nice long stems that are great for crafting with. We have this redbud tree, this eastern redbud tree, and look at how much those cutter bees have been using those leaves for making nests. That's always a great sign. I love to see a sign of pollinator activity, and there's for sure tons of that on the front yard lavender. Now, we also always plant a row of zinnias out here out front in these raised beds, and these zinnias that I plant in the raised beds never do as well as the ones that are in the ground. You'll see those here in a little bit. And that's probably because these raised beds are filled with purchased soil, and as you'll remember from my Zinnia Growing 101 video, zinnias really like poor soil, not this rich soil. Now, these are growing in these raised beds from birdies, and to be honest, I've been really disappointed in them. These are only 3 years old, and they're bowing a lot. They flex quite a bit, and not only that, but the little center supports rusted out. So as I've been digging in these, I've been finding all those center supports that are meant to kind of hold the beds together, and they're completely rusted. So it seems like they're not meant to be in contact with wet soil, and the inside of the beds is doing the same thing. So they're slowly corroding. I'm not sure if this is just a problem with these specifically Corton steel beds, but yeah, not super impressed. This is why I always just plant in the ground for the most part. All right, so over here you guys might recall that we did our addition last year, we finished, and so this part of the house is actually new. And so this area is one that I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with. This is kind of a placeholder right now. So we did a mix of micro clover and a drought tolerant grass because we didn't want to have to water it. And while I don't love using clover all the time in my climate, just because it's not native, and we do like to lean a little bit more on the native stuff, it does help when we plant it with grass. So I wouldn't just plant the clover because in the winter here, it tends to die out, and then we just leave the kind of a mud pit here. But if we've got it planted with the grass helps keep it from becoming a mud pit. So anyway, it's a good placeholder for now. That clover is kind of helping this area because it was really, really compacted, and I didn't get a chance to plant a cover crop in it this year. So I don't hate it. It's looking fine. We planted this really pretty Japanese maple in here, and it's a actually cold tolerant one, so it does better in our climate. But in general, these Japanese maples like to have a little bit of protection. So you can see it's in a little bit of a sheltered area here from the wind, and it also gets a little bit of residual heat from the brick on our house. So hopefully it's going to survive. It's made it one winter so far here in our zone 5-6. So hopefully it makes it. Coming back around here, there's a couple things I wanted to show you because you guys might remember last year what we did with this area here, which was we cover cropped it and tried to fix this soil. So this was the area that when we were doing construction got absolutely destroyed. So lots of equipment on this. It was very, very compacted. We couldn't even get a shovel into it. So we did a couple things. We added some compost, we added some mycorrhizas, some inoculants. We cover cropped this area. We added a little bit of compost, but not a whole lot. Cover cropped it over the winter. And then this spring we planted this also with a mix of grass and clover. I had thought about doing a garden bed here, but honestly, I have so much space to keep up with. I just really couldn't fathom keeping up with another set of garden beds. So grass it is for now, and then we can always convert this to garden beds later if we want to. Over here in this bed, this is kind of fun. We were sent actually some bulbs that I had never tried before. So we planted these calla lilies, and I have actually never grown these as a cut. So I just kind of popped them in here to these perennial beds with these hydrangeas, and I'm actually pretty surprised at how much I like them. I don't love the orange. Orange isn't usually a color that I would have picked. Definitely might add these next year because they've been blooming for almost 2 months now. So really nice long-lasting blooms and kind of fun little pops of color. All right, let's head over to the field because I wanted to show some things that aren't looking so great this year. I fully realize I haven't done a full tour of the remodeled area yet, but this is our little workshop space. If the weather is really bad, like this winter, we had to do some cover cropping workshops in here and some soil blocking workshops. So it's a nice overflow space, but we really still prefer to use the barn for most things because it's just cuter. All right, over the bridge through the density here, we've got this native willow has really taken off this year. In hindsight, I planted it a little bit too close to this bridge, but it is doing really well. And what I love to use the willow for is it's kind of a nice little dupe for eucalyptus. So it looks it has that same kind of shape of the leaves. So it's a nice little filler. And also it's really great for doing things like wattle fences. So over here in our kind of vegetable area, and this is really more for my family and myself. I don't sell a lot from this space, but we've got all of our kale in here. We've got a ton of chives. We have potatoes back there, lots of peppers because we love shishito peppers around here. But this is all just kind of really home production space. And of course, the greenhouse is back there. So we put the greenhouse fairly close to the workshop and the cooler just because in the wintertime it is nice to be able to just quickly walk out and not have to go very far. And then down here is the wattle fencing I was talking about. So this is what those willow trees are nice for. Because willows do grow very fast, they're a great tree to use for this kind of weaving. And you could do two things. You could put these sticks in the ground. I've used rebar here just because I didn't want them to rot out. But easy to weave in and out. I'll do a video on these next spring. Quite honestly, I don't have the energy to do it right now, but later. Okay. Over here is the wildness of our native meadow area. And this was something that we have been trying to get going for a few years now. And it's finally, I feel like, filled in. This is year 3. And this area is really nice and lush now. It's got things like hummingbird mint. We've got sunflowers in here, lots of rudbeckia, echinacea, baptisia. We have a lot of drought-tolerant things like sedum, which aren't necessarily native, but the bees do appreciate. Lots of asters, yarrow. So this is really just dedicated for pollinators, beneficial insects, birds as well. So in the mornings, this is a very, very active spot. We also have lots of goldenrod in here, which I love, that yellow goldenrod for kind of pops of color. So we did have an issue this year with this area. And really this is my fault because when we planted this, I thought it would be enough to just smother out the existing grass. And I did cardboard, I did soil on top of that. And unfortunately, that doesn't always work. So if you have a grass like smooth brome, like we have in here, which is a rhizome-based grass, what will happen is that grass continues to grow underneath. Even if you try to smother it out, it creeps via these little stolons underground in these little rhizomes. And so this will continue to grow, and that's what happened. So this spring, this was all overgrown with grass, and Quite honestly, I'm pulling it out here and there, but it's a little bit of a mess. So I'm leaving it for now because there are still lots of great plants in here. It does still look fine, but eventually we're going to have to deal with it because that grass is going to start to outcompete all of these great natives. Now these two areas are really just more dedicated for grasses. So we have things like our little blue stem, our big blue stem, switchgrass, prairie dropseed, all native grasses. So nothing in here gets irrigated. These are all absolutely drought tolerant, no irrigation in these areas. The sunflowers seed themselves everywhere. But these areas are really great for the birds. So especially in the fall and the winter when we get these seed heads on top of all these grasses, the birds really love eating all of this, and having that bird population around really helps us with things like grasshoppers. So one of the things I used to have a lot of trouble with here at the farm, but we haven't really had for the last couple of years, has been those grasshoppers, because we have so many birds now. Now, usually when people come to the farm, they come in along this gravel driveway. You can see on the right, we've got lots of Rocky Mountain junipers. And on the left, we used to have actually sunflowers growing all along the edge of this driveway just because they're great phytoremediators. And I suspected that there might be some heavy metals in the soil. So we've been growing a lot of sunflowers. I pulled a lot of them this year, and we actually have some blackberries going. You can see Cora approves of those. And as we go a little bit further, we kind of work toward our peony field. So obviously peonies aren't blooming now, but what I have been really happy with is how that native blue grama grass is filling in those walkways between those peonies. So this is usually the view that folks see when they come into the farm to do a U-pick. So let's go ahead and take a look at this main field. This is where we have most of our annual flowers in production. Here we've got kind of this tree that I didn't realize was gonna get so big. Our roses, which of course are being attacked by Japanese beetles, so I've kind of given up on them for a while, but we'll probably deadhead all of these tomorrow. I don't know, the roses for most of the year I kind of just give up on because of those Japanese beetles. So we get a good flush in June, and then July is usually a loss, August is a loss, and then we'll usually get a nice flush again in September. Every year I say I'm gonna pull them all out. This year I actually planted more, so it's gardener math, I guess. You can never have enough roses, but also you can clearly have too many roses. All right, heading down here, this is the row that we're gonna start working on. So this is kind of the time of year where we're starting to flip beds, and that means that things are starting to kind of fade out and die out and not look great. Like you can see these snapdragons clearly do not look well. They've gotten rust, they're just starting to die out. So we're gonna tackle this area, we're gonna pull all of this out, we're gonna cover crop this. So this is the perfect time of year to do this. This was snapdragons and stock and cool weather loving plants. So they no longer like it because it's too hot. So we're gonna cut all this out, we'll cover crop it. That'll help heal that soil for next year. And I'm gonna put our cover cropping class in the links below, as well as a couple other videos, but I'll be showing how we're doing all of this as we go. So if you just wanna make sure you're subscribed, you'll see what we're doing here. But over here, the lisianthus are just starting to peak. And you guys might remember that I had pinched a lot of these late, very late, so much later than I normally would have. So you can see that that did work, because what we've got down here is these are the ones that I didn't pinch that are totally fully in bloom right now. So pretty. And then down here we have the ones that I pinched late. So these ones are gonna bloom here in the next month. So it did work to stagger out those blooms. Otherwise, this entire row would have been blooming right now. And then of course we have to use all those flowers. So I am gonna definitely do that next year, where I do a later pinch on those lisianthus instead of pinching them when they're little tiny babies. I'll link that video below too so that you can see what stage I'm talking about. We have lots of things that are kind of starting to go to seed over here. Our feverfew is starting to go to seed, so we have to cut that down. It's just always this time of year, a constant battle between letting things bloom and letting them go to seed a little bit and be natural, but not letting them go to seed too much. This is an area we kind of expanded last year. So we had a lot more of these native grasses in this space. And then I transplanted these out of the field. And as much as I love these are called solid aster. So it's actually a hybrid between a solidago goldenrod and an aster. And as much as I love them, and they're very cute and they have nice space life, and these are great for making flower crowns. my favorite for flower crowns. But what happens is, you can see, they flop. So I had actually taken a lot of these out of the field and I transplanted them over here because this is just kind of a landscapey area. It's okay for them to be floppy over here. We don't really cut from them anymore. But I think I'm gonna cut the rest of them out of the field next year because even though we netted them and supported them this year, they're still flopping over. So kind of a bummer when they do that, but the pollinators do love them. They're filling in the space, so I'm gonna leave them here for now. But as far as cutting, they're okay. I guess if we did a better net on them, maybe they'd be a little bit better for cutting, but we'll take a look at those in the field. Oh, okay, one fail we've had this year has been this cover cropped zinnia row. So this was a row that I had cover cropped last year with hairy vetch, and you can see what that does is it leaves this kind of matting of this was actually the cover crop that we terminated in here. And so this does work really well. You can see that it's kind of formed a nice thick mat. There's not a ton of weeds growing in here. I mean, considering that we haven't really weeded it, there's one right here, but considering we haven't weeded this space, it doesn't look too bad. But the zinnias just are not doing well, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm not sure if it's the seed. I'm not sure if they're just getting too much shade, is probably most likely because these golden currants have really started to take over. So we planted these golden currants as a hedgerow to block the wind, which usually comes this way. So the idea was that these were going to help block the wind, but also provide some habitat for the birds. The birds love the golden currants. They like to nest in here. All winter I hear them hopping around, but it's creating a lot of shade right here. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave this row, but we're gonna take out this hedgerow down here. We just don't need 2 hedgerows of golden currant. So that's gonna be one project that we tackle here this coming year. I do love the hairy vetch cover crop. I still would do it again. I love the hairy vetch. It's one of those ones that's a little bit trickier to control. So, but it leaves a great mulch for the whole next season. All right, down here we've got, actually surprisingly, we still have some foxglove blooming. Considering how hot it's been, that really surprises me, but here we are. We had deadheaded, we planted way too much feverfew this year, like just way too much. I had this whole section, we had that whole section, we had a section there, we had a section here. And the problem with feverfew is that it all blooms at the same time. So you can see we just deadheaded a lot of it, just again, to keep it from going to seed everywhere. This is the chunk of out of control natives. Everybody needs one. So you can see we've got lots of rudbeckia in here. I actually love this size of rudbeckia. They're just petite and cute and little and not oversized. Really like that size. And then I also really like this Rudbeckia triloba. These are so cute in bouquets, just kind of light and dancey. But you can see this whole area. We did trim back actually a couple weeks ago just so you could even walk down here. But between the bee balm, the anise hyssop, the Rudbeckia, the calendula, there's just a lot of stuff in here that likes to reseed. And while we like to leave a lot of it for the birds, sometimes there's too much reseeding. So we're probably gonna cut down quite a bit of this just so that we don't get too much reseeding next year, especially this anise hyssop. But it's so good. This is my favorite. It makes a great simple syrup. It tastes kind of licoricey. And it also just, the leaves are sweet and licoricey themselves. My kids love to pull the leaves off of this one and eat them. So I don't mind it reseeding itself that much, but again, there's such a thing as too much. These are asters here, purple asters. So another native that the bees love. These are a later fall bloomer, so they're not blooming yet. But when they do, they'll be covered with purple. This is the hedgerow that I mentioned we're gonna keep. We did trim this one back a little bit just to help get some sunlight down. So they're getting quite tall. They are happy, so I hate to cut them down, but again, in a small field like this, they're taking up a lot of real estate. Now down here is where we have most of our blooms right now. So we've got our drops of Jupiter oregano. You guys have heard me talk about this one a ton. It's one of my absolute favorites just because it's great both as a foliage in the spring, but also as a bloom in the summer. The zinnia row, I'm gonna do a dedicated zinnia video, so I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about the zinnias, but they are looking great. So we've got our Queenie red lime, we have our Queenie lime, we have our ballerinas, and then we have our agave from Johnny's, and these are new varieties this year that we're growing, and really been enjoying all of these. I'm going to do a zinnia video because I'm going to show you guys how to harvest the seeds from these when they're green, so stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe for all of that. We've got the cosmos down here, which I really hate. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why I had Savannah plant them this year, other than I think we just had empty space and I was like, let's put some cosmos in. But you have to keep up so frequently with deadheading them. And if you don't, they reseed and they don't have the best vase life. So quite honestly, they're not my fave, but if you got some space and you don't mind them reseeding themselves, grow them. I do only grow, I will say, I prefer to grow the doubles. So these are all like the double click, the double ruffled cosmos versus like the singles. So you can see these ones are more of a single form. I usually like to grow these kind of little fancier ones, but still don't love them. Oh, that looks cute. The last of the echinops over there. We need to cut down the rest of those echinops, so that's a project. I want to do something with them, like some kind of a, I don't know, like an installation or a blue ball. Cut that out. Down here we've got bells of Ireland that I have not planted for 5 years. They just keep reseeding themselves. You can see they've got the seeds in here. Once they've gotten to the stage where these seeds in here are turned black, this is when they're viable. So they just reseed everywhere. And so we usually have random pockets of them throughout the field. People like them for U-picks. They just have some spiky thorns on them. So we do have to be careful when people are picking those. But I don't know. They're kind of a cute little octopus on the end of the row. Gets a little bit crazy over here. We have more oregano. I love the Greek oregano. This is really just true Greek oregano, which blooms white. Makes a really great filler. Just sprawls, and this one reseeds a lot. The Drops of Jupiter actually doesn't really reseed, but this one does. The yarrow we pretty much cut down to make our yarrow cloud. You guys saw that video a couple weeks ago. We've got some mums in here that are going to be more fall bloomers. So the mums with the rudbeckia are usually really nice together. And then we did these lilies this year, but this row all together has been kind of a mess this year. We tried planting these lily bulbs in here, and quite frankly, I just really don't like lilies. But you know who clearly does are the bunnies. And you can tell that they have just absolutely destroyed the lower parts of all of these. So between not really loving them and the bunnies, I don't think we're ever gonna grow more lilies, unfortunately. But down here we have our lovely dahlias making their display here in late summer. So our cafe au laits are here. Always one of my favorites. I will never not grow cafe au lait. And of course we overwinter all of these, so we're gonna let these continue to bloom until frost. This was year 3 of overwintering them, and it's just been very successful, and I will never go back to digging them ever again. So that was a success. There's one. Lots of borage here that self-seeded itself. We've got our echinacea. If we don't keep up with cutting our echinacea, it tends to get a little bit scraggly looking, but I do still like it for its kind of architectural form. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll just pull the petals off, and then we'll just use it kind of like, it looks a little bit like a craspedia or a billy ball. So a fun textural. Again, even if the petals are looking a little bit not so great. So here's that solid aster. So if we pull it up, I don't know, maybe I'll tackle it. Maybe I'll tackle it tomorrow. I mean, they are cute. They're a nice little filler, and they do have a great vase life, but just the floppiness is, and it makes it hard to even just walk past them because they're covered with bees during the morning and during the day. So it's a little bit precarious walking past them with all of the bees. All right, over here, this area was a bit of an oopsie. So last summer, when we cut down the sunflowers, I had Dawn, who's our other farmhand, stack all of the stalks behind the barn because it used to be a really weedy area and it was just kind of empty. There wasn't anything back there. And so I was like, well, maybe some sunflowers will reseed. And now it's a sunflower jungle. And there's a lot of rust in there. So that's a problem for future Bree and Savvy, and we will deal with it. Maybe probably with the bush hog. But yeah, so there's a cautionary tale. You guys probably already know this, but they will recede aggressively. Here's a squash plant that we don't really know what it is, where it came from. It is growing all the way across the walkway now. Still haven't really seen any fruits on it, but there's lots of great blossoms, so maybe we'll just do some like fried squash blossoms. You know when you get that one squash plant, and it's doing so well. If I had planted a pumpkin or a squash, it would not look as good as this one that's planted itself. This is our arbor where we've got some native 9 bark on it. So of course, always trying to focus on some native plants, especially on the perimeter around the field. So we've got our native 9 bark here. This is a really pretty one. It blooms really nice in the spring. And then we also have this native clematis. So these seed pods that it makes are just so interesting. I really want to do something with this. I don't know, like some kind of architectural, but the native version of sweet autumn clematis. So sweet autumn clematis is actually invasive. This one is not, and it's native. So that's always a win. Over here, you'll see all the tomatoes we need to harvest. So many tomatoes, but the tomatoes are looking really good. You guys might remember I have shown kind of how we trellis these up on this old fence. It's very effective. So again, I had mentioned during that video that there's pros and cons to kind of pruning them to one main stem, but one of the pros is that it's very easy to harvest from them. So that's why I like doing it that way. But again, it's all personal choice. We've got our lavender blooming in here really well. That helps with the pollination, of course, of the tomatoes. And then over here, we've got our boys, Midnight and Roosevelt, who have been yelling at us this whole time. Hi boys, what's going on? Are you hungry? So we've been kind of discussing whether the sheep are gonna stay, just because I really would like to give them a little bit more space. As we've been converting so much of the field and the property to native plants and native grasses, we've actually been, did you get locked out of the coop? We've been trying to keep them from eating it. So the problem is with all those native grasses and things, if we let the sheep out to graze, they eat a lot of it down. So we're kind of running into problems with that. We're not letting them graze as much as I really think they should be. So we've been discussing potentially rehoming Midnight and Roosevelt. So it's not something that I want to do, but I feel like for their good, maybe we should. All right, we'll pop over here to the chicken coop. They got an upgrade this year. They got a little bit more space. So, oh, hi everyone. So the chickens have this whole shed now, which used to be actually our storage shed. Now that we have 9 chickens, we just felt like they needed a little bit more space. So they have this whole coop, and we got a couple broody gals. Can I yeah, I know. Can you, this is our rooster. Being a jerk. Okay. Hi. Hi. Okay. 2 eggs. Can I take those? Thank you. You're just brooding on the floor. Okay, you over there. Okay, guys, go get some water. Go get some water. Okay. All right. Well, we got some eggs anyway. Wait, that's a tomato. Yeah, okay, good night, ladies. So the woods, as you might remember from my last video where I talked about burnout, and I was showing you the woods because they've gotten a little bit out of control this year. And they, to be fair, when we started the farm, we couldn't even walk back in this area. So we've come a long way, but it's still, is it hard to see? Let me see the, oh. So we've come a long way in this space. But we still have a long ways to go. So this area got really weedy and overgrown this year. We had actually put a lot of our fill dirt from our construction project back here, and I had hoped to be able to get it seeded with natives last year, but we didn't get a chance, so the weeds moved in. It's just what happens. So I spent all week weeding, as you can see. I've got my seed. I've got blue grama, I have lacy phacelia and yarrow. And we're gonna just seed this whole area back here, get it watered in this fall, and that's a really good time to do that. So the fall is a great time, early fall, to tackle kind of those native meadow areas if you want to start doing that, because you're not competing as much with the weeds like you would be in the spring. So when we're direct seeding, that's the problem, is we tend to run into a lot of weed issues. So doing it in the fall, where the weed seeds and the germination is not as intense as in the spring, is just a little bit easier. So we're gonna tackle that area this week. We still have tons of choke cherries in here. These are our suckering choke cherries. You can see they put out these black berries. The birds absolutely love these. So there's so much bird activity back here in the woods because of these choke cherry thickets, and then also our American plum thickets. So we have both of those plants, and they're both native. They're both what they call keystone species, so very important for a lot of different pollinators and also a lot of the bird population. Here's the American plums. These are not ripe yet, but when they do ripen, they make a really nice jam or jelly. And usually this whole area is the American plums, and then usually this is our pumpkin tunnel. But of course this year I was just totally overwhelmed and burned out, and so we never got it planted. So it's still just a tunnel. But the good news is I won't have to put it back up for the fall, for the winter. So we store our tractor in there for now. Next year I'll probably do something else on that tunnel, but I don't know. For this year it is what it is, and that's one of the things, right, that we all have to kind of just embrace, is that there are years where you just don't get to everything, and we just have to be okay with that as gardeners and as farmers. But I will say that we've done a couple areas that I am really happy about. So this area over here, this is our like pile of stuff we have to chip. Every year we just kind of pile up all of our shrubs and branches, and then we'll come and get a chipper and chip all this, then we use it on the pathways. But we have been doing a lot of this blue grama. So that's what I mentioned I had gotten back for the woods, is this blue grama. And this whole area used to just be bare and also full of poison hemlock and thistle. So the blue grama, I have found, North American native, germinates very easily for a native grass, just like a regular grass does, and takes very little water. So we don't water any of these areas. Here's another patch of it where it's come in, and what it does is it forms this really nice thick mat. And so the weeds really don't germinate in here, but you can see how dry the soil is. I mean, this is really, really dry. It's all cracked. So very dry, but again, getting no irrigation, no extra water, but it's still, for kind of a wild, natural look, I think it looks pretty good. So anyway, we're trying to do more patches of that here and there. We've got some milkweed going here, but of course, I've only seen a few monarchs this year, unfortunately. But we just let that go crazy. And then we've got lots of little apple trees in here from, of course, when this is originally all an orchard. So there's still apple trees here and there, but mostly what you see in here is the choke cherries. They do sucker and they spread. So while it's a great plant, and I do love it, if you want to plant a choke cherry, just be aware that it is going to sucker and it's going to spread. Here's the compost pile. I need to water it. This is something else I have not been keeping up with this summer, but usually if we're keeping this watered, summer is a great time to be composting, but I mean, it's doing okay. Keeping a tarp on it does help keep the moisture in, but ideally in our climate, we're keeping our compost moist so that it's cooking faster. All right, this is an old sink. This is like our old chicken coop, which we still have because it's good for quarantining. So in case there's a sick chicken, they can go in here and have their own space. And then over here is the other part of the woods that is very overwhelming and needs to be tackled. And I've been kind of just baseline keeping it weeded, but you can see the suckering elms are kind of starting to sprout in here. We do have a black walnut in here. We have a cottonwood. So some of this stuff I just kind of leave. There's lots of cleome, which is the Rocky Mountain bee plant in here, but this is all blank fill dirt. This is all ragweed that I've pulled out of here. So we just have to seed this, because if we leave it bare like this, that's when it gets really weedy. So I need to come in here, I need to seed all of this with that blue grama, with some yarrow, and just kind of outcompete all of the weeds. All right guys, so that is it. I hope you enjoyed our little tour. Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully it just kind of shows you that, you know, what you see on social media is not always what's the reality. It's very easy to kind of pick and choose things to show you guys and things to not show you, but it is real and it is honest to show you that there are areas that are totally out of control and I have lost my energy on, just like I'm sure you guys have in your gardens this year. So hopefully that resonates. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to let me know down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you guys around here next time at the farm. Thanks, Abby, for filming.